was AP US History. Hello, hello. It is Friday, TGIF. Welcome to the AP Lit. This is like our last real content session. We'll have some review sessions and practice sessions next week that we'll talk a little more about at the end. But golly, this month has really flown by. Also, happy May 1st. I'm Susan Barber from Atlanta, Georgia. Grady High School. Look who's with me today. My co-teacher is back. He's been hanging out with our daughter who is home from college some during this hour, but he's back today. So I wanted to give a couple of shout outs. Miss Cardo's class, River Ridge High School in Newport Richey, Florida. Thanks for joining us. Glad to have y'all with us. And also Mr. Crowell's class in Evansville, Indiana at Reitz High School. Hello to y'all. So many people. We have just been honored to hang out with y'all during this time. Mr. Escobar, how are you doing?
I am doing great as always. I'm a little saddened, I think, when I hear you say that this is almost it, right? We have 1 week of prep week, and that week's going to run a little differently. Students are going to be doing the bulk of the work. We're going to be guiding them. We do have 1 or 2 exciting events planned for the week, but this is the last week of explicit instruction on our end. I do want to say hello to Tyler and Emily. We do read the emails, so here's the shout out that you asked for. And there's no way that we can go through every single email, every single kind note that you have sent us, but know that we've read them. I'll just say, Ed, I read yours. It really, really touched me. And I'm gonna miss this. I'm gonna miss this dearly when I retreat back to my classroom, and this is in the past, but it's been a wonderful experience. I think that we have learned so much from each other, and I'll never ever think that I work in isolation ever again. So let's dive right in. Last night, what did they have to do, Miss Barber?
So last night they wrote an essay, is that right?
They were
or they just did a close reading because we talked about close reading yesterday.
Right.
Yeah, so we looked at this passage, the Belinda passage. We were doing a close read of this. We're going to look at some student samples today for this. So we talked about close reading yesterday, went through a practice of how I did a close reading, and that's what you were going to do. This is a shorter passage, pretty accessible. So it's probably a good passage for you to practice your close reading skills. So today, do we want to read this?
I think we should, because if we have someone joining us today and they're going to have to know this one to follow today's lesson. So should we start with the prompt?
Yeah, let's see. Go ahead.
Okay, in the following passage from Maria Edgeworth's 1801 novel, Belinda, the narrator provides a description of Clarence Hervey, one of the suitors of the novel's protagonist, Belinda Portman. Mrs. Stanhope, Belinda's aunt, hopes to improve her niece's social prospects and therefore has arranged to have Belinda stay with the fashionable Lady Delacour. Read the passage carefully, then write an essay in which you analyze Clarence Hervey's complex character as Edgeworth develops it through such literary techniques as tone, point of view, and language. We have not changed this prompt to the stable prompt, and we kept the author name and title because we're going to be using student samples today, and the students will refer to these elements. And we wanted to make sure that you weren't confused as to, how did these kids realize that it was from the novel Belinda and all that. But again, this year's exam, we're going to have no title and no author, but we will have a date.
Correct.
Right, so that might be some new information for people. We were notified that you will have a date, so that's public knowledge now. So that might help to give some context to the passage.
Yep. You want me to read?
Sure.
Okay, Clarence Hervey might have been a little more than a pleasant young man if he had not been smitten with the desire of being thought superior in everything and of being the most admired person in all companies. He had been early flattered with the idea that he was a man of genius, and he imagined that, as such, he was entitled to be imprudent, wild, and eccentric. His affected singularity in order to establish his claims to genius. He had considerable literary talents by which he was distinguished at Oxford, but he was so dreadfully afraid of passing for a pedant that when he came into the company of the idle and the ignorant, he pretended to disdain every species of knowledge. His chameleon character seemed to vary in different lights and according to the different situations in which he happened to be placed. He could be all things to all men and to all women. He was supposed to be a favorite with the fair sex, and of all his various excellencies and defects, there was none on which he valued himself so much as his gallantry. He was not profligate, but he had a strong sense of humor and quick feelings of humanity. But he was so easily led, or rather so easily excited by his companions, and his companions were now of such a sort that it was probable he would soon become vicious. As to his connection with Lady Delacour, he would have started with horror at the idea of disturbing the peace of a family. But in her family, he said, there was no peace to disturb. He was vain of having it seen by the world that he was distinguished by a lady of her wit and fashion, and he did not think it incumbent on him to be more scrupulous or more attentive to appearances than her ladyship. By Lord Delacour's jealousy he was sometimes provoked, sometimes amused, and sometimes flattered. He was constantly all of her ladyship's party in public and private. Consequently, he saw Belinda almost every day, and every day he saw her with increasing admiration of her beauty and with increasing dread of being taken in to marry a niece of the catch matchmaker, the name by which Miss Stanhope was known amongst the men of his acquaintance. Young ladies who have the misfortune to be conducted by these artful dames are always supposed to be partners in all the speculations, though their names may not appear in the firm. If he had not been prejudiced by the character of her aunt, Mr. Hervey would have thought Belinda an undesigning, unaffected girl. But now he suspected her of artifice in every word, look, and motion. And even when he felt himself most charmed by her powers of pleasing, he was most inclined to despise her for what he thought such premature proficiency in scientific coquetry. He had not he had not sufficient resolution to keep beyond the sphere of her attraction, but frequently, when he found himself within it, he cursed his folly and drew back with sudden terror.
This is definitely a passage that I think you have to read twice, right?
Ha,
And you, well, you spoke about that yesterday, right? The first
yeah,
time, read it and just sort of
get your
like
bearing.
get your bearing, right? Be hit by
Yeah,
it at that point, and then once you think you know what you know, and once you think you know what you don't know, right? I'm confused about this section here. I'm confused about that section there. Then you'll reread it. But you, if you watched yesterday's video, you knew this was homework, and you should have read it a few times, and you should have annotated it. And through these annotations, you should get a sense for who these characters are, what they're made up of, and what their relationships are. But here is a perfect example. I was talking to with my students yesterday in a Zoom call, and I was telling them we cannot ignore the context that's provided by the prompt. Any little bit helps
hmm
before we enter the reading. We have so many characters, we have so many motivations and perspectives here that if we don't internalize the business up here that we're given with who Clarence Hervey is in relation to Miss Portman and Mrs. Stanhope and Belinda's aunt, we're going to be lost for most of this passage. So we have to focus on that prompt as carefully as
hmm
possible.
hmm
So what are we doing today?
So today we are kind of putting it all together. We're going to look, yesterday we really focused on reading. Your assignment was to close read, and today we're going to look at writing and just how all of those observations and ideas that you had from reading, close reading the passage, how that translates to writing. So again, it's not one specific thing, but we're looking at how all of these individual ideas that we have been exploring, these different techniques, these different ways into making meaning in the passage, how they all fit together and form an essay and a piece of analysis about the work.
Absolutely, but we have to be grounded on these rubrics, right? So let's just quickly review. Row A is the thesis row. This is the point that we think is probably most accessible to students. You
Mm-hmm.
understand that you're not just restating the prompt, but you're actually presenting a defensible interpretation of the passage. There are other things you can do in a thesis. You can start to develop the line of reasoning. You
Mm-hmm.
can add to the complexity of the answer, and all these things are amazingly incredible things that you ought to do because it's going to help you with row B. But if you want to look at row A in isolation, you provide the answer to the prompt, even if it's a very simple answer, and you're going to earn this point. But this row A is the launching pad towards row B. We
And
spoke.
for row, yeah, let me just say for row A, the thing that we just want to reiterate is you have to have a defensible claim. I mean, it's all hanging on that. Do I have a defensible claim? Is there some point, some insight I have, not just regurgitating? Is there something, some original insight that I am making and am going to spend the rest of my paper defending?
So, for a student who is listening today and still doesn't understand what we mean by that defensible claim, let's look at this prompt one more time. In the following passage from Edward's 1801 novel, Belinda, the narrator provides a description of Clarence Hervey, one of the suitors of the novel's protagonist, Belinda Portman. So, if my thesis is in this passage, we meet Clarence Hervey, who is a suitor for Belinda Portman.
That's
There's
your
no
thesis?
interpretation. That's my
Right.
thesis.
No, so that would not get the point because all you're doing is summarizing and just spitting this information back out. You've not given the reader anything new or insightful from the passage.
So let's remember that the defensible interpretation is something that comes from you. It's not something that you could turn to line 40 and say, that's where the answer is, or in the prompt, that's where the answer is. This is where you join the party. This is where you say, now that I've read this passage, now that I've considered this passage through the perspective of this prompt, this is what I have to say. This is what I'm bringing to the table. And that's essentially what that defensible interpretation is, correct?
Yes. Row
And
B.
row B, we go to row B. In one of the earlier videos, we spoke about the distinction between the
Mhm.
2-point and the 3-point columns here. And it's a really important distinction because we are trying to move everyone into the 3 and 4-point categories and trying to move away from the 0, 1, and 2-point categories. And what we saw here was that this whole business of a line of reasoning, this essay that creates signal posts for us, this essay that consistently provides claim, evidence, and commentary. This is what it takes for us to get into the 3-point. And to get into the 4-point, in one of the latter videos, we really spoke about the depth of the commentary,
Mhm.
asking why and why and why, and then filling in those gaps. So it's not sufficient to just put a piece of evidence and then have one sentence summarizing what the quote says or reiterating your claim. But now that we have a claim and some evidence, so what? Why is that there? What is your interpretation of this? How do we now understand things so much clearer because we have gone through a series of claim, evidence, commentary units in our essay? And as long as you do that, you're going to be hitting these last two columns. And then in yesterday's video, think it was yesterday, right? It's all a
Two
blur
day,
now.
2 days
Two
ago.
2 days ago, we spoke about sophistication, and we spoke about how um, if you take care of trying to earn the 4 points in row B, that's probably how you're going to maximize your points for this essay. And the sophistication point is really like the cherry on top. Your language is vivid and persuasive. You're able to really dig into the complexities and the tensions, the nuances of the characters. You perhaps you're the student out there who can balance multiple alternative interpretations of the passage, even though we spoke about how difficult that actually is to create. Or you can genuinely, organically, throughout your essay, intro, body, and conclusion, you really
Mhm.
can speak to how this passage can be placed within a broader context. It's not about hitting that that closing sentence. Oh, and by the way, this is about humanity. That does not do it. That's not sophistication. Sophistication is when these ideas are woven throughout the essay. So in a nutshell, that's a review of the 3 rows of the rubric.
So let's look at
So
some
let's
student
look at
samples.
samples. Well, let's talk about this first. What are some of the points that we have made through these? How many videos have we made? I'm 30 of
100.
them, 25, 80, I don't know. Through all of these videos, these are just some of the points that we've made. You need to have a clear, defensible thesis. You need to have topic sentences that define the purpose of the paragraph. We don't write in a stream of consciousness type of way, which means that many of us have to outline before we start writing. We need to have apt, specific, embedded quotations throughout the essay. A line of reasoning has to be established. Commentary should make up most of your body paragraph. It should not be made up mostly of quotations, for example. Grammar rules should be followed. You have about 2 weeks. Let's get on quill.org. Let's get on some websites that can help us
Mhm.
with grammar so that we can fix those little idiosyncrasies we may have. Writing develops ideas. You're not supposed to just repeat yourselves over and over again. Once you've made a claim, you've provided evidence, and you've given commentary, the next step should be to propel that argument forward, to recognize shifts in the character, shifts in the setting, shifts in the conflicts that we find throughout the passage. Writing is always moving forward. And it isn't until your conclusion, maybe, that you might take a step back and look at what you've done, but still with an eye towards the future. This is now how I understand everything. Plot summary is not the goal. Not only is plot summary not the goal, but plot summary is not necessary. You write as if your reader has read the passage. You write as if your reader has read the novel. Okay? You don't
Mhm.
have to tell us the story. Tell us your interpretation of why the story was created, why the story was created in the manner in which it was, and discuss the function of multiple literary techniques. If you study row B, if you only talk about imagery throughout your entire essay, you haven't really discussed the richness of possibilities that are inherent within the passage. Yeah, it's easy. Just do all these things.
But you know what? Honestly, like y'all have been practicing all year, and I think it's just muscle memory at this point. Honestly, you just put in the work, and on exam day, you show up and you do it. So much of this, I'm not saying it's not hard work, but I think you just rely on your instincts and your gut, and you're going to be fine because you've been practicing this the whole time. So it's hard, it's complex, it's hard, but yet it kind of works itself out, you know?
Yeah, I always think the essay, the exam itself is your opportunity to show off.
Show what you know. Yep.
Right? Like just go and like show the world
Yes.
what you can now do. Yeah.
Exactly. It really is a day of celebration and for you to feel proud about what you've learned and what you've accomplished, and now
Yeah,
you get to show people that. So it really is. I mean, in my class, and it'll be different this year, but it's a day of celebration for us.
absolutely. Yeah, we're gonna slay the beast that day.
Yep.
All right, so again, we're gonna look at Belinda, and we're going to look at intro and body paragraphs for Belinda, and we're just gonna talk through them. We're gonna talk about what's good and how we could improve each of these. So let's look at an introduction, which my boxes are covering everything here. In the passage from Belinda, the speaker develops the very complex and somewhat arrogant character of Clarence Harvey through the use of point of view, tone, and language. So, what do we have to say about this, Miss Barber?
This is short. I mean, it does have a defensible element because it says, somewhat arrogant character. Still, there's no line of reasoning developed here. So I would like to see this thesis developed further so you're set up to write a really good essay.
And I wonder if the student thinks that there is there are layers here and there's a line of reasoning perhaps when they say it's complex and somewhat arrogant. But notice what Miss Barber said. Miss Barber said that the answer lies in the somewhat arrogant. The fact that you're calling the character complex isn't really contributing anything to your argument. As a matter of fact, you got that word from the prompt. So if the prompt already
Right.
gave it to you, then you're not contributing anything. I also, this is just a pet peeve of mine. Try to spell names correctly. You're not going to get points deducted. It's not, it's not that kind of exam. But children, the passage is in front of you. They mention Hervey's name 50,000 times. Let's write the name correctly, okay? It happens every year, doesn't it? I mean, sometimes they make up the names, and I know you're nervous, but every little bit helps to polish your essay. So let's keep the names um, as close to the original as possible.
So I do think if this writer would have, said like, why is the speaker complex? If they
Mm,
could have fleshed that out, even with a couple of character trait adjectives that tend to or appear to juxtapose each other,
yeah.
that would definitely be a step in the right
Yeah,
direction.
think about the difference in this introduction in this thesis. If the writer would have just said the speaker develops the the very insecure yet
Hmm.
arrogant character of,
Yes.
as a reader, I'm really interested in that, and
And
that
how
in and of
can both of the
itself,
right, how are both of those things possible? You
right?
know?
It's almost a paradox, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
And there you're starting to develop a line of reasoning, especially if you argue that
right.
he appears insecure in these instances, but when you transition to these other instances, arrogance comes out. At that point, it's all about fleshing it out. It's about developing the thesis. Um, and other than that, I think it's great. Students often ask us like, should we list the terms that we're going to use? You can. You don't have to. You don't get points rewarded or taken away if you do or if you don't. Other students are taught that if you list these things, you should definitely not leave them quote unquote naked. Try to put an adjective, like what is the tone, what
Mhm.
kind of language. All that will develop the complexity of your argument.
Mhm. The
Um,
depth. Mhm.
the depth, absolutely, and you're setting yourself up maybe to not forget what you're going to write about, and eventually help the commentary and the development of ideas, which will affect row B. But in terms of the thesis, must you have the terms? No.
Mm-mm.
Can you? Absolutely. So I think it's a matter of choice and what you've been doing all year long.
Yep.
I mean, just keep at it, right?
Yep. What your teacher has told you to do and what you're comfortable doing. Now's not the time to make a ton of changes.
Yeah. Let's look at a body paragraph. One of the primary devices that lets the reader get a good view of Harvey's character is through point of view. Because it is third person omnipotent, the reader gets a very unbiased view of Mr. Harvey. Had it been through the eyes of one of his acquaintances or even Harvey himself, the details presented to the audience would be biased, and some would be completely non existent. The unbiased view allows the reader to interpret for themselves just what kind of character Harvey has. Is he really as pompous as he seems, or is he someone who tries to be respectful and cautious and just is not? This unbiased view leads into the tone of the piece, which, although at times seems critical or condescending, such as in line 2,
Mm-hmm.
3, if he had not been smitten with the desire of being thought superior in everything, the overall tone is rather matter of fact, no excessively critical nor overly supportive, simply mild. Um, this body paragraph does a lot, um, and it does a lot of good things. Let's focus on the positive. I see a lot of uh, development of some ideas. There's some imprecision. There's some imprecision with what the point of view is. Um, third person omniscient is what the writer meant to say, but there is some discussion about when you have a third person omniscient, there's a
Mm-hmm.
less bias than if it would have been. Um, what I wish the student would have said though is, so because we have this third person omniscient and because it's less biased, we now see that Hervey is X. Right. I don't think we
Mm-hmm.
get to the
Right.
characterization of Mr. Hervey.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there is that question, and it's an interesting question. Is he really as pompous as he seems, or is he someone who tries to be respectful and cautious and just is not? I wish it wouldn't have been left as a question. I want the student to now develop the possibilities for this character. But there's some good attempt at trying to flesh out some ideas, but obviously some things need improvement. What do you see?
Yeah, I totally agree. I wish this student would have gone on further and discussed how what they feel um, the character is presented. So the question, I think it does allow for an interesting way to think about the point of view, but I agree. I totally wish the student would have continued on with their thoughts about this. And then at the end, the overall tone is matter of fact. I wish they would have again extended this and talked about what this matter of fact tone accomplishes in a piece, how it ties back to the thesis, how it contributes more to the meaning than just identification of the tone.
Maybe even a new paragraph for that
Absolutely. I mean, you
argumentation,
could write
right?
an
Yeah,
entire paragraph on that. Yes.
yeah. Um, the quotation, there's an attempt at embedding the quotation. I don't know that it's the most successful attempt at embedding it. But 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 the student is getting there. It is lacking the commentary though after the
Yes.
quotation, right?
Yes. You can not, if you're giving solid commentary, don't worry about giving too much. If you're analyzing it, if you're explaining, you push that as far as you can.
Yeah, yeah. And maybe if like the first say 8 or 9 lines, all this talk about the point of view could have been
Mm-hmm.
um lessened just a bit,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe we can have some textual evidence there where we see the nature of the point of view or how the point of view is really arriving at our interpretation of characterization or the relationship or something. I think some textual evidence might be needed earlier on in the paragraph. And then maybe the student would have felt more more compelled to develop the
Mhm.
argument based on the evidence. But go ahead, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, and this is, why we have said, like, if you have words and short phrases all the way throughout, that really allows you to go from text evidence to straight into your commentary, and tie that commentary back to short phrases. Really, one quote in a paragraph of this length, it's just not enough text evidence.
To sustain all the claims, yeah. And
Correct.
we had talked about maybe not leading with devices, and I would actually say that that is a good advice for this reader. If we look at the first sentence, one of the primary devices that lets the reader get a good view of Harvey's character is through point of view. Instead of driving point of view in this sentence, if we would have led with Harvey's character,
Yes.
so we an analysis of the passage reveals Harvey's character to be X. You could even
Yep.
say the primary way through which this is conveyed is through point of view. That's fine, but lead with that characterization. And then your passage is actually going to be about that characterization and not about the point of view.
Yep.
Point of view would be a piece of evidence to contribute to what the characterization is. What we have here, fortunately, is we have the commentary that the College Board provided. So let's look at it and see what we can learn. The writer of this essay pays attention to the prompt. Absolutely, right?
Mhm.
Um, we're in the world of Belinda here, discussing how point of view and tone contribute to an understanding of character. It was very clear that they were talking about
Mhm.
these two techniques. However, by the middle of the second paragraph, which is the one that we showed you, I believe. However, by the middle of the second paragraph, both the potential and the limitations of the response are apparent. An interesting portrait of Clarence with attention to the text is emerging. Is he really as pompous as he seems? It emerges, however, through a mixture of articulate analysis and somewhat awkward, inelegant language. We, of course, look past minor mechanical errors. Many students, for example, misspelled the main character's last name, but the discussion of point of view is inexact.
Mhm.
Third person omnipotent isn't quite precise, right? And the superficial, this unbiased view allows the reader to interpret for themselves.
Mhm.
What am I interpreting? What is it that I'm seeing now through this analysis? Reading the tone merely as rather matter of fact similarly places the analysis of a complex passage in a straitjacket. So the student makes claims, but there isn't development of ideas. Again, maybe separating it into two paragraphs, using what we've talked about, which is periodically ask yourselves why, and then try to answer those whys, would have, I think, developed this paragraph and firmly established the response as as an as an upper response. I don't know what the language is going to be now with the new rubric, right? We're so used to upper half, lower half.
Right.
The idea with writing an effective essay is what then, Ms. Barber?
We just want claims. You're making a claim, and then you're going to give text evidence to support that claim, and then you're going to give commentary that explains the function of devices, how the author is presenting information. You're going to give commentary that ties the text evidence back to your thesis, or further explains it. How does this evidence contribute to an interpretation of the work, or a central or controlling idea? That's what we're looking for.
Absolutely. And for today, there's no real homework. The
No, you
homework,
get
I
the
think,
weekend off.
yeah, well, not quite, not off. We're just not dictating what you're doing. There's so many things you can do. You should
Right.
review past videos, set up your notes. Are you going to use notes? Are you going to use any Do you want a checklist of tips that you got to create? You got to get ready for exam day. And this is the best exam ever because it's open note, open books,
Right.
right? um and you know, you're not consulting teachers, you're not consulting friends, but you can definitely have a checklist of top tips that you want to keep in mind when you're writing your essays. So you can look at past videos, you can set up your notes, you can write additional essays, and we've gone through this before. You go on AP Classroom, you click on the optional student practices, you get to practice, you get to see sample responses, you get to submit it. Not to Miss Barber, but you get to submit it to AP Classroom, right? Rest, read a book. You know,
Yeah.
let's get our heads ready for testing, because this is real, this is coming, and you're prepared, and you're gonna do great. But let's be smart about what steps we follow over the next few days. We will see you next week for prep week, right?
Right. Monday and Wednesday, you'll have opportunities to write practice essays in a time setting. Tuesday, our chief reader, David Miller, is going to be with us and we'll be reviewing samples and also just talking to students and teachers in general about AP literature and writing. And he's really amazing. I would encourage all of you to tune in that day and listen to him. Thursday, we will review Wednesday's practice writing, and then Friday, we'll just have some general exam tips, strategies, last minute information about the exam. So that's kind of the rough schedule for next week.
Yeah. And this
Here's
is
my
Miss
contact
Barber.
information. I know some people are, this is your last week. Again, it's been a privilege to be with you. I have a couple of websites. I don't make any money off of them, so I don't mind giving them to you. AP Lit Help is a site that I run, and it's for teachers. We just have a lot of teacher resources there. A lot of different teachers from the community contribute to that, my personal site. And then on Twitter, my professional account, and Instagram, I am half professional and half personal. And here's my email. So any way I can help you, um, you know, I mean, that's why we're here, because we just have a heart for helping teachers and for helping students in any way we can.
Absolutely. And I don't have a website, and I don't have social media. You know, halfway through this, I considered, hey, maybe I should open one of those, get on the Twitter or on the Instagram, or, you know, and it's just not me.
And that's fine. Yep,
I was
that's fine.
almost convinced to do it, and it's just not me. But I wish I could see all you folks. I wish I could meet all you folks, and I wish that we could continue these videos forever. Maybe not daily, but definitely um, forever. I'm going to miss everyone out there, but it's not goodbye. You will join us for prep week, I hope.
Yep.
But for those of you who will not tune in again, thank you so much for joining us. It has been a
Thank
pleasure.
you. Bear says goodbye, and hopefully we'll see some of you next week. Happy weekend. Proud of y'all, class of 2020. We love ya.